This is the continuation of the summary of Light Novel Volume 8 from Tensura. So if you haven't seen part 1, make sure to go check it out before watching this video. Link will be at the bottom. Food starts being distributed, everyone is having a fun time, and Veldra starts teaching the knights how to eat this Japanese food. Veldra asks them to eat raw egg and they don't want to, so Rimuru smacks him in the head and lets him know no one would deny him since he is too strong, and tells them to eat however they want. Fritz decides to eat it anyway and realizes he has never eaten anything like it, so he can't describe it. Spiking everyone's curiosity to try it, Hinata questions how come they have so much white rice since it's valuable, and Rimuru explains that they cheated the system. They can't really produce it, so they use she unskilled cook to harvest white rice. But Rimuru says it's not enough. Hinata questions why he isn't satisfied, and he mentions it's not as much as the food as he means entertainment. He wants to be able to share entertainment systems and even manga with the people of that world. Hinata is impressed, and Luminous Valentine boasts to how crazy Rimuru's plan actually is and how he has stuck by it since he first announced it. Hinata asks if he has any plans, and Rimuru actually shares everything with her, hoping she would see Tempest as her second home. He explains another method of long-form communication with steel threads, basically a way to create a cell phone. He also explains he would like to implement human teachers in schools, and Hinata is very happy to see Rimuru think about those things, but warns him that stuff needs to stay confidential. Then Raphael activates Rimuru's nullification and he sobers up instantly. Hinata gets reminded that Rimuru speaking all of that to her shows how much he trusts them, and Hinata gives Rimuru some advice. She warns him if he does flashy things like this, he will get attacked by the angels, referring to the Great Tenma War. The Tenma War is when angels attack cities that are too advanced in order to keep humanity in check from progressing too much. That's why the current world hasn't advanced much than the past 500 years. But Rimuru states if they mess with Tempest, Tempest will fight back. Luminous also vows to never let another city fall. A few days later, an announcement was made to the human world that a non-aggression pact had been stated with Tempest. A new relationship between humans and monsters and demons was forming. We fast forward sometime to the Kingdom of Bloomin, where Rimuru is seen walking around and watching people enjoy bowls of ramen, and we switch to a conversation between the merchant and the noble. He asks for a loan stating the success is guaranteed but needs capital, just doesn't want to do any research on the venture. However, he gets interrupted by Rimuru. He apologizes for interrupting the meeting, but the noble offers to buy Rimuru and correct his manners, only to be kicked out by the merchant, saying he won't be accepting any requests for loans. The merchant explains to Rimuru he wanted to start an elf slave trade. He goes on to explain what kind of race the elves are, pointing out that they are them humans that are crossed with fairies. The conversation ends and Rimuru states he has a small job for the merchant. Rimuru wants to throw a festival accounting for his grand appearance to demonstrate his country's appeal. Rimuru offers an invitation but says he prefers the merchant to host the event. Obviously foreigners will come to this festival, so Rimuru wants a grand place for his festival, something that will make the visitors want to come back to Tempest in the future while keeping the budget in check. Mior Miles accepts and they begin their strategy meeting, sending invitations all over the Dwarf Kingdom, where they have a meeting to discuss this new demon lord, claiming Rimuru is a threat and a renegotiation needs to be addressed. King Gazel's strength is questioned since Hinata was persuaded by Rimuru, and she is stated to be equal in strength to Dwargo. Dwargo calms everyone down by telling them that Rimuru is his junior disciple and they were the first ever nation to support them, so there is nothing to worry, stating that as long as Rimuru's heart stays good, he will never abandon him. He asks for any objections, but no one wishes to disagree. They then receive an invitation from Rimuru to join him at his festival. We switch over to the sorcery dynasty of Sarion, where the elves reside. They have also been invited to the festival, and the Empress seems very hurt that she has never been able to visit Tempest before. Eluad mentions the invitation from Tempest and expresses is eager to go, but he doesn't want her to, so he tries to find a way to make her uninterested. Unfortunately, the Empress seems to have tasted some new sweets that she adores, but the person who makes them is closing up his shop and moving to a new location, that location being Tempest, so that seals the deal with her accepting an invitation to the festival. He is worried that some of the royal houses will use this opportunity to influence national affairs, but the Empress is not worried in the slightest. She then questions about Rimuru taking on the cost of construction roads between the two nations, and it is stated Rimuru will spearhead costs and only charge tolls, at which the Empress realizes that monopolizing tolls, Rimuru will make a fortune. He mentions that the cost of constructing the road would be a nightmare due to all of the territories needed to be crossed, so it wasn't worth the hassle. The Empress thinks he is being naive though. The elves could have done this, but they didn't because there was no incentive. Now things have changed. After Walpurgis, there was a redistribution of land. with the Tempest in the dead center, the possibilities are endless, so she suggests participating in the construction aspect of things, but participating in the bare minimum. So the Empress states she will be attending personally the festival, and arrangements are made for them to be able to attend the festival. The setting changes and we are on Ramires' dominion. She is having a conversation with Beretta. They are discussing how their place is very boring and they need to relocate. Trainee is all for the idea and Beretta asks where. Ramires describes what sounds to be exactly Tempest and Beretta is a bit doubtful. Back to Rimuru and the merchant, Rimuru offers him to come work for him after this project is done, as the head of commerce or advertising or even finances. The merchant is very pleased that Rimuru has so much faith in him, so Miles accepts. Afterwards, Rimuru summons Ranga, asks him to go back to the capital and deliver the blueprints, stating he will stay back as he is worried about the noble that the merchant kicked out. So he asks Ranga to put security on him and lets him know he is going to visit a friend. That friend turns out to be Fuse. Rimuru then explains to him everything that had transpired with the Western Holy Church, and Rimuru gets informed that Yuki actually pleaded for Tempest, which Rimuru responds by saying he will invite Yuki to the festival as well as Fuse. As Rimuru leaves, he gets met with Gobemon, the escort Rimuru had requested for the merchant. Gobemon is actually strong enough to have competed against Gupta to be the rider captain, so Rimuru asks him to protect the merchant. Gobemon seems to be very strong goblin, but hard-headed. He refuses to work under Gupta, and because of this and his physical abilities, he distances himself from subordinates. So Rimuru asks him to observe the merchant and learn how to better interact with others, as if he does, he will receive Rimuru's katana as a reward, which he accepts. Rimuru returns back to his shack where he plans to relax, but gets interrupted by Ranga since there seems to be a problem. That problem turns out to be Ramires. She is claiming her own territory inside Tempest. She's actually already even built a house. That's when Rimuru surprises her. Ramires and Trainee are avoiding the answers, but Beretta explains the situation. Ramires got lonely and decided to move to Tempest. That was it. Rimuru is concerned the house is too small, but Ramires states the only thing that matters is the door. When they open, it is a massive space that is shown inside, thanks to her skill Labyrinth World Creation, which creates a massive amount of space for her to use, which Rimuru then deems incredibly useful, so he asks to discuss more. Rimuru wants to create a hollow area under the Colosseum, but that may affect the structure itself, because Rimuru is thinking on how to protect his people if something happens. So he mentions to Ramires making a door and inside a dungeon for adventurers to snuck out of the ground and a small portion of Urasania people, and they offer to help with construction to pay back his generosity. They talk about Ramires' limit of 100 floors, but what she built has nothing, and Rimuru has Veldora in mind to create monsters, but his issue is others getting killed. Ramires eases his mind by saying she can revive people that die inside the labyrinth, which impresses Rimuru, and so he heads over to discuss things with Veldora. And so the creation of the labyrinth is on the way, explaining there's 100 floors with traps, monsters, and treasure chests, with the goal to make it a tourist attraction. So since the labyrinth is almost fully constructed, Rimuru needs to ask a certain someone about spawning monsters. Veldora shows no interest, but Rimuru actually sweet talks him into paying attention by calling him gullible. Veldora transforms into his dragon form and pretends to be the final boss and releases his aura. Then he was placed in the floor 100, allowed to release his aura as much as he wanted, and his magicules spawn other monsters. Obviously, the difficulty would increase the deeper in the dungeon, meaning closer to Veldora's aura. Beretta talks about helping with construction, and Rimuru remembers something. He removes the master key from Beretta and places it inside Ramires, making her the true master of Beretta, to which they were very happy about. Then they move on to the signing part of things. However, Ramires has some questions because Rimuru would like terrains to change, like an erupting volcano, and she doesn't think that would be possible. Then someone interrupts and says it's perfectly possible as long as you actually capture a wildfire dragon and tame it. That someone turns out to be Milim, who thought Rimuru was up to something, so she came to check. Ramires lets Milim know that she is even living with Rimuru, and Milim is not happy about it because she wants to live in Tempest too. And so Milim and Ramires start arguing over who is best. Rimuru then saves the day by asking Shuna to bring snacks. Milim is sad she wasn't invited, but Rimuru states she was going to be invited last, since he is actually inviting the Dragon Faithful to Tempest so he can teach them how to cook. Rimuru asks Milim if she told Carrion and Frey, which she didn't, and they go on to talk about capturing the dragon. Milim states dragons have the ability to reshape their environment, so if provided with enough magicules, they can add a terrain effect, and that's what Veldora would be for. Veldora, however, is a offended that Rimuru thinks he is similar to regular dragons. He goes on to explain that there are only 4 true dragons in existence, but all of the other average dragons all originate from the spirit dragon, which is Milim's pet that was given to her by Veldanava. When the spirit dragon died, its dragon factor was spread around the world, and that is the reason the lesser dragons were born as regular monsters. They are called dragons because they share similarities with the true dragons, but they're actually closer to dinosaurs than anything. Milim then tells Rimuru that there's about 4 types of elemental dragons: fire, ice, wind, and earth. Rimuru then plans on capturing one of each to let them loose on their own floors, with the earth in 96, wind in 97, ice in 98, fire in 99, and then the final boss will be Veldra in floor 100. And then Milim leaves to capture the dragons. Rimuru leaves to check on the gear they will drop in the treasure chest, which isn't easy to use by average people. All of that thanks to the unique skill godly craftsman that makes everything he creates unique grade. Then he hands over a sword to Rimuru, a new katana for him to use that was actually adapted to Rimuru's magic. Benimaru then shows up with Alvis. They had left Tempest in order to form relations with other tribes of the Yura Forest. But Benimaru seems distraught, so Rimuru asks what's wrong, and Benimaru states it's a personal matter. We get a flashback of what happened, and a new character gets introduced, Momiji. She is an emissary of the Tenge tribe. They think Rimuru wants to conquer their land, but they explain he just wants to build a road across. They also request permission to build a tunnel. They are a bit more skeptical about this, but it is not necessary. Momiji, however, is very insulted they asked to dig through the mountain, but is even more offended that Alvis is there. She tries using her skill Celestial Snake Eyes, but Momiji blocks it off, and while they start facing off, Benimaru just sips on his tea. And as the battle starts heating up, Benimaru steps in to stop the attack. Alvis is confused, asking if he thinks she would have lost, and Benimaru states she actually would have died had he not intervened. Someone else steps in, and it turns out to be Momiji's mother, the elder of the Tengu tribe. We get another view of Rimuru and Benimaru discussing the incident. She was believed to be so sick, but that wasn't the case. She's close to her natural lifespan. Benimaru remembers Hakuro used to talk about the elder, this lady who had enough magic heals to be called a mountain god, but right now her magic heals are close to 0, which is possible she used most of her force in order to birth and name Momiji. So he thinks about how weird Rimuru is since he named a gazillion people and still is a beast. She states to have connections to the ogre land and apologizes for not helping, but Benimaru doesn't blame her. However, he is curious about her connection. She seems to know that Benimaru's style is called Haze, and she mentions to have been taught by someone named Byakuya Araki, who was Hakuro's grandfather. The elder was on a journey to train her sword skills, and she ran into Araki. Even though he was just a human, she asked him to teach her. She seems to have been trained together with Hakuro. Not only that, she fell in love with him and got pregnant, making Momiji Hakuro's daughter. But she took a very long time to gestate, since Momiji is only 15 years old. Benimaru explains their family tree and lets the elder know that Hakuro is actually alive and has gained a name, and that he has been training Benimaru as well. And then she points out that Benimaru will be married to Momiji. The elder states she is ready to grant anything they want, even acknowledge Rimuru as the ruler of their land, but that will only happen if Benimaru marries her daughter Momiji. While Rimuru is teasing Benimaru, he needs time to think about it. Momiji is all for it though, although Benimaru needs to question Hakuro about it. We switch over to a view from Falmouth where Hakuro and Diablo are helping with relations. Yom is giving a speech and he renamed the country Farmenas and announces himself as king of Farmenas, which the citizens love. Diablo states he wants to return to Rimuru and leaves Rasen in charge. Back in Tempest, the merchant has arrived and he has seen the inside of his place, is massively impressed. Then Goemon shows up missing an arm. When Rimuru asks and he explains he made a mistake. The merchant had been attacked several times, but Goemon stopped every time until there got an enemy that was too strong, but Goemon got hit with petrifying gas on his hand, so he cut off the entire arm to avoid catching it further. Thankfully he got the help and they finished off the enemy, but when offered a regeneration potion, he refused. It is a lesson to himself because he feels like he failed, but Rimuru regenerates it, saying his mission was a success since he protected them. Rimuru then tells him that he needs to learn to trust others, so the merchant asks Goemon to stay and help train his security team, which they are very excited about. Then Rimuru gives him the katana and tells him no matter how good he is, he can't do everything alone. While they are leaving, Rimuru thinks to himself that someone is sending enslaved monsters against him, and he isn't happy with that and orders Rigger to increase security. A few days later, the festival is about to begin. The rabbit men offer themselves as Rimuru's servants. The daughter of the leader of the rabbit men gets lost guests in town, and Rimuru states curiosity is good. Others were asking to move into Tempest just like Ramades. The chief of the lizard men show up looking like a human, and Rimuru teases him like he forgot, but he switches back. He asked about his son Gabriel, and Rimuru states he has become a very important member of Tempest. Rimuru tells Gabriel to spend time with his father, but dude is clueless until they tell him, and he leaves and joins his father. Then the Gozu and Mizu tribe offer themselves to Rimuru, and he thinks they would be perfect as bosses in the dungeon. Then something happens. A notice comes in that the barrier over the entire city that Shuna had posted was now destroyed, which then 3 hostile characters show up. When they go to check it out, members of the Yomagiri have been attacked and knocked out. Shion asks them to speak up, and one states to be pissed because his prey was stolen. His prey being Clayman, Shion offers herself to deal with the intruder, but recognizes Shion, saying that his old man told him all about her, which means he must have been present when it happened. Not even half of a panel later, Shion's beat the living hell out of all 3 of them. Then they confess their father to be Dagruel, and they introduce themselves as Datra, Laura, and Deborah. They are there because Dagruel sent them to be trained by Rimuru. He accepts since it would mean Dagruel owes him a favor, and he puts them under Shion's command, so Shion takes them under her wing. Gozu and Mizu are still waiting and offer themselves to Rimuru again. He makes them stop their fighting between each races and moves on. Then an elf shows expressing gratitude for stopping the war between the previous races because it was destroying the elf territory. So he offered all of the elves to move into the labyrinth. Floor 95 became a safe spot where some dryads moved, and so it became a forest. This would make it easy for the elves to live in. The elves accept and say he will bring his people. Rimuru then asks Soei to look into Viscount Kazak from Bloomland. He creates a body double and leaves. Rimuru seems to think he is responsible for the missing elves, all because he wants to become an owner of an elf club. Later at night, Diablo returns with Geld and Hakuro, so Rimuru explains to Hakuro that he has a daughter and everything that happened. When asked, Benimaru says he has too much responsibility, which makes Hakuro ask Benimaru if he is too good for his daughter, and they begin arguing. Then they go on to the final day of audiences, which is now happening in the conference room with the Tengu. Momiji still had her reservations towards Rimuru because she thought Rimuru and Demon Lord Frey wanted to conquer them. Reason being, Frey was trying to take over them before, but Momiji now realizes that Frey and Carrion are under Milim. But after explaining everything was a misunderstanding, Momiji calmed down, so they finish the agreement, and Rimuru receives a letter from Kaede. She talks about how her daughter is young and will make mistakes, and then they realize they are reading a letter sent towards Hakuro, not Rimuru. Then Hakuro shows up and finishes reading the letter. He seems very happy to be alive and find out all about this. Momiji and Hakuro introduce themselves to each other, and he says Momiji reminds him of her mother, so she hugs him. Then Benimaru receives a message from Alvis. She says that she has set herself on defeating Momiji to become Benimaru's wife, but she will accept the spot of a concubine if necessary. And Rimuru gives Benimaru a hard time for it, so Benimaru states one wife is more than enough. I don't know why, but that was what he said. Momiji accepts the challenge. Rimuru says it's fine with him, and then Shuna and Shion turn on a rivalry between each other over Rimuru. We skip over to another day. Rimuru is announcing the merchant will be the new chief of financial affairs if everything in the festival goes well. The Founders Festival is 3 days away. The schedule states the first day will be a show at the theater instead of the battle tournament. Day 2 will be the battle tournament. Final match will be taking place on day 3, and the dungeon will be open. While Rimuru is excited for the debut, Ramide states she has a big problem. She states there's way too much power from Veldra, turning floors between 71 and 90 into forests. Essentially, the magic heals from Veldra got sucked up by the plant life and they grew too much, so it would take a long time to create monsters. But the dungeon was designed to have stronger bosses and monsters the higher the number of the floor. Then Rimuru's thoughts get interrupted. Shuna, Ranga, and Trainee seem to have solutions in mind. Shuna suggests Adelman and his undead forces, which would help the town as well as since people get scared at night when the undead come out of their cave. Trainee then suggests Zegion and Apito, the insectoids. However, Rimuru doubts that they are boss level, but Veldra vows to train them. Last up is Ranga. He suggests the fox spirit they rescued from Clayman as she finally woke up. Rimuru then decides to name her, and he chooses the name Kumara. After being named, Kumara grew tails to a total of 9, and she took on a lot of magic heals from Rimuru. Then it's time for Soei to speak. Turns out Kazakh, the noble who was trying to get elf slaves, was actually being run by a criminal group called Orthus. They used to have the power of a small nation, but Zoe keeps talking in past tense because they have already been destroyed by none other than Lightspeed Masayuki, the hero, a hero whom people speak since they profess to slay the demon lord Rimuru. Zoe asks to take care of him, but Rimuru says to let him handle it peacefully, and that concludes the volume.